Good evening. I would like to introduce today our guest, Mr. Zemovit Govin, philosopher from Poland. Mr. Govin will say a few words about himself. What does he do?
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's great being here. Just one disclaimer, I'm speaking just for myself, not for my employer. So I'm a PhD student in philosophy. I'm a student of objectivism, of Iran's philosophy. It's my specialty. Um, I mostly focus on ethics and philosophy of well-being and happiness, but my dissertation topic is on Iran's view of foreign policy and ethics of war.
Ethics of war. It's a very interesting question in modern situation.
It
Uh,
is. It is. Yeah.
so, you came here before yesterday, as I know. And you spend a few lectures here
Yeah.
in this university. We are now in University of Georgia and also in Sabauni.
Yes.
Yes. Uh, so how did you like the situation in our country, in these universities?
So I spoke. So I gave two lectures. One lecture was on the relations between Europe and Russia prior to the 2022 invasion. So what I offered, I applied philosophy, a philosophical perspective on those relations prior to the invasion of 2022 in Ukraine. My second lecture, which was yesterday, was about Rand's view on the relationship between morality and freedom. So how morality is more fundamental for political freedom, why we need certain ethics for political freedom. So these were my two talks.
Okay. Before I ask about situation of Poland against the war, I would like to remind you that, as I remember, Rand was for more strict decisions against Soviet Russia.
Yes,
I
that's
have
true.
listened some
That's true.
interview.
Ayn Rand, yes. Rand didn't believe that appeasement can work, and I think that was one of my points during my first talk, that because European countries didn't really pronounce moral judgment prior to the invasion, uh, they decided that they will appease Russia. They will appease Putin. They didn't take Russia's nature seriously. And
Yes,
I think it was the same with Soviet Russia when Rand was talking about it.
yes, it looked like it was clear for her at the time and not clear for modern politicians yet.
Yes, it's not clear for
Maybe
them.
today too.
Maybe even after the invasion, even though I was focusing on the situation prior to the invasion, I think something changed, but we don't know yet if it has changed for good. So, for example, I'm not sure that today's politicians, even after the invasion, understand that we need to make moral judgment. We need to call Putin for what he is. Putin is a murderer. Vladimir Putin is a criminal, and Russia is a criminal country. And we need to think about that, and we need to stop pretending that Russia is the same country as Denmark, as Norway, as the US, as Poland. They're a different country. It's a dictatorship, and we need to treat them as such. So, what are the actions that we need to take against a dictatorship? For example, we cannot appease them, for starters. But we had been appeasing Russia for years and years, despite the aggression against Georgia in 2008, despite the aggression against Ukraine in 2014, despite the poisonings on the UK soil, and other aggressive acts.
Yes.
European leaders had been appeasing Russia all the time because they didn't understand the necessity of moral judgment, the necessity to understand that that each country has a certain nature, and you need to act towards that country in accordance with its nature. In the case of Russia, its nature is a bloodthirsty dictatorship.
Yes. So once here was Ilarionov, if you know him, and he was expert in with Putin for
Hmm.
some while, and after he left to USA, he has said that like this might that not possible to remake Russia if not do same thing as it happened in the 1945 in Berlin.
Hmm.
It, the world should do same thing.
Hmm.
How do you think? Is it possible for now?
Is it possible to overthrow the Russian government and Putin?
Yeah.
Well, it's not really a question for a philosopher, but
Yes, I
personally,
understand it.
yeah, but personally, I don't think it's possible that because Putin has so much power, some experts compare his power to Stalin's power, and of course we know that Stalin died eventually, so we might see that. But I don't, I do not think that Putin's death will mean the end of Russian
Yes.
imperialism. I think that there needs to be. I mean, first of all, Russia needs to lose the war in Ukraine. They need to suffer. They need to face the consequences.
They should feel what is it war.
Yes, yes.
So it's very important, certainly. But to if Putin dies, does it mean that the war will finish at once?
Well, we can know that for sure. It might end. It might not end because other people like Putin will come to power. Other politicians, his pupils, other oligarchs. We don't know, and we
There
cannot
may
know.
come another possibility to change something. So sometimes I think if Hitler was killed in, for example, 1941 or 42, will
There
it,
were still
oh,
Nazis.
yes, would it end? No
I don't
one
think
knows.
so, and I think that it's when you think about it, it's more about Russian society. Russian society
Yes, it's most
supports.
important, not Putin himself,
Yeah.
but the society.
One of the mistakes that some people make is that they think it's only about Putin. No, it's about Russian people who support
Yes,
Putin, who support Russian imperialism. And
yes,
that's the problem. That
it is a
Russian people
problem.
reject
I mean
liberalism.
this one, yes, Matrasia, for
Yes.
them. So they think if they catch something more places, more territory, they are happy. They don't have maybe gas, in how maybe electricity too, but more territory makes
At
everybody
least we are
happy.
a big country. Yeah,
Yes,
that's what some Russians say.
yes,
Yeah.
it's their mentality, and this should be changed somehow. It is very important. I think
Yes, although I don't think it's in our hands to change the Russian culture, the perspective of an average Russian. But it's in our hands to protect ourselves.
yeah,
And that is why I think that what European leaders had been doing prior to the invasion was immoral. The appeasement, all the deals, Nord Stream 1,
yes,
Nord Stream 2,
yes,
pretending that Putin is yet another politician.
yes. It was all time question of discussion. I remember about it, but anyway, every time it was decided pro Putin in that time, and now too, if it begins again, if war stops somehow, the politicians, I'm not sure they will do another things.
I'm afraid they might not. They might want to go back uh, to this situation from before the invasion. Yes, I'm afraid so. But it would be yet. It would be the same mistake all over again.
German was like this situation 70 years ago, but they somehow realized that they are defeated, and they decide to be big country not because of take more territories against other countries, but to make their country greater by economic growth.
Hmm.
So to come to this decision would help Russian too and their neighbors too. So how is it possible without defeating them?
That's a great question. I wish I had an answer to this question. I think for starters, it would mean that Russia is really being treated as it should have been treated in the past. That is, we really impose severe sanctions on Russia. We are saying you have no place in our capitals. You have no place in Paris, in Berlin, in London, and in other places in the world. Now, I don't think that it's possible to just invade Russia just like that. It's still a nuclear superpower,
Yes.
but we can harm their economy, uh, and maybe Russian society will change. The most important thing is don't help them, don't help Putin, don't make them rich.
Yes, it's interesting, but these sanctions, how effective they are, I'm not sure.
Well, so far they are not very effective.
Is it?
So it's the politician's job, the Western politician's job, to think about what sanctions would be more severe. What about the Security Council in the UN? Why is Russia part of it? It's absurd.
Yes, maybe, but they all time they find another way to take what they want, to trade with other people. Maybe in cheaper price they sell their neft and oil, but anyway they sell.
Yes, the world is not united against Russia.
Yes,
China is pro-Russia.
I
India,
think
we
it's
don't know.
impossible.
Yeah, yeah, it's a difficult situation.
Yes,
It's a very difficult situation that we are in. What I think that we can do is impose more sanctions, more severe sanctions, and just say we're cutting off any diplomatic relations with you, and we're helping Ukraine more. Especially, the European countries should be helping more Ukraine, sending more equipment, more military equipment, more aircrafts, tanks, anything to make Russia lose the war.
yes. So certainly we should go this way, but I all time think that these politicians looking to the, for example, French president, German, this guy Chancellor or Orban, Hungarian president. So it seems impossible to make agreement between them and
Yeah,
to make united.
Yeah, well, Orban is another story. He's just Putin's puppet.
Mostly, yes.
Yeah. When it comes to Scholz and Macron, I'm afraid that they are
Scholz
helpless.
is maybe a little bit better than
He's a
Merkel.
little bit better than Macron, but I think that they are helpless pragmatists. They do not think in principles. They do not think in the long term. They take actions for the short term gains. They do not understand that what we really need, what they need, what Germany
For
needs,
the election.
we need Russia that is defeated in some way, and we need a liberal Russia, and we need to stop pretending that Russia is a normal country. I think that's the necessary condition for any change, that we as Europeans stop pretending that Russia is a normal country. It is not. It's a dictatorship. It's a bloody dictatorship that kills children, innocent people, and we need to understand that.
Yes. But so their propaganda works on that Ukrainians kills children too.
It
And they
is.
begin before.
It is
the
Russian
Russians
propaganda for Russians. I
Yes.
don't think that Europeans believe that. I think that
But the
Europeans.
Russians believe.
Yes, that is
That's
why
a problem.
it is a problem. It is a problem. That is why, hopefully, some Russians will, at least those who fled, who left Russia, maybe they will know the truth and they will tell that truth to other Russians. I don't know. From my perspective, what's important is that people who are actually invaded, Ukrainians, they have a right to fight back, and they should fight back, and we should support that. And maybe, we don't know how much longer this war will last. Maybe 10 years. I don't, I don't know. But the most important thing is to make sure that the Ukrainians have what they need to defeat Russia.
Yes. We are for Ukraine and we all are for
Yes.
Ukraine, certainly.
More and more Americans are believing that the USA is wasting money, like supporting Ukraine in this war because they think like they're using it in some bureaucracy or something like that. And what do you think about that?
Well, I'm not sure that it's really in the U.S. interest to support Ukraine with all that money and weaponry. I I think there's the case to make against that, and I think that might be true that what the U.S. should do is just to pronounce moral judgment to support Ukraine morally, but not financially. But I think that European countries are in a different position.
Yeah, but Ukraine is basically fighting USA's war. It's like a continuation of Cold War, but it's a real war now. They don't
That's
have to
what
fight.
some realists believe. I don't think that's true. I don't think that Russia is a real existential threat to the U.S. And to the extent that it isn't, I don't think that the U.S. should be supporting Ukraine. And we would like the U.S. to do that, but I'm not sure that it's in the American interest. And I think that the U.S. should think about the American interest, and we should think about our interest, and our European interest is to defeat Russia.
How about the situation in Poland? You go to the streets of Poland,
Mm-hmm.
what they speak about.
Yeah. So in terms about the war,
Yes, Poland's about the war.
yeah. So Polish people are against Russia, against Russia's imperialism, against the invasion. They support Ukrainians financially, morally. We have a lot, like millions of refugees from Ukraine in Poland. Polish people
No
are very
Russians there
welcome.
from Russia.
In
Russian
Poland,
people, yes.
I don't think there are many Russians in Poland.
So we have Russians here too.
Yes, you do. I know.
Ukrainians and
I
Russians
know.
too.
No, we don't have Russians in. I mean, we have some, but it's like
Somebody maybe.
a few Russians. But we have millions of Ukrainians, and they work in Poland, and we know them. They learn our language. But nonetheless, the point is, Polish people do support Ukraine in this war. Poland is sending tanks and everything that we can to help Ukraine win the war. And as much as I'm critical of our government, it's doing a good job in terms of supporting Ukraine in this war. And I think that 95% of Polish society supports Ukraine and is against Russia.
Yes, okay, it's very well. So I hoped to receive like these answers when I was asking. So anyway, somehow I think this war will finish. I hope next year, if not this year. But how would be situation for Europe and Euro Union after the war?
Mm.
How do you think? What should happen?
It really depends on how the war will end.
How will it end?
I don't know. I wish I
No
knew.
one knows, but
I hope it will not end with any successions, any concessions for Russia. That Russia will have to give back Crimea, that Russia will have to give back Donetsk and Luhansk.
everything should give back. Yes.
Yeah, and they will have nothing, not a single part of Ukraine. But I'm not saying it's probable. I'm saying that should happen, and that would be best for us. There should be no going back to prior the war.
So also some people say that Russia should be disintegrate into maybe 80 different countries.
That would be ideal, but I don't think it's probable. I don't think it will happen. Maybe in the future, but for now, what we really need is that Russian military has to lose the war. Maybe then Russian people will see that Putin is really he cannot win the war, and maybe they will see that Russian government is a dictatorship and that they should oppose it. But of course, we all wish that Russian Federation as such would not exist, but it does, and I think it will for at least some decades.
If Putin dies, it actually could happen. Like Alexander the Great died, it's disassembled them.
Yeah, but I don't think it's only Putin.
There's so much infighting in the Russian government right now between businessmen and the government officials between itself. It could actually happen, but
Well, it's hard to predict. I'm afraid we would have another Putin, but I don't think that Putin will die. There were many rumors about attempts
Yeah,
of
about
assassinating
Putin,
Putin, but nothing happened. So, and I don't think anything will happen to Putin anytime soon. I wish they assassinated him, but I don't think it will happen.
it may not help, and also the situation now is different than it was during the time of Alexander the Great, because at that time it was everything was done by himself, and all the strategy was it was not united like Russia. They have many different needs to in every direction to catch everything together, and the Russians do it not during the Putin, but already 300 or 400 years they do this and continue to work on this direction. So hard to imagine. Until they did not understand that they are in a poor situation, they will not change their mentality, and it's a
Sure.
big problem.
Sure.
So anyway, sometimes I think that when I look at NATO will maybe take should go to another level against like this possibilities to make like big wars in Europe or in any another place. How do you think? Should change NATO somehow or not?
I mean, first of all, NATO doesn't make sense if European countries don't understand that they need to spend more money in military.
Yes, it's one of the most important things that not all countries spend enough money for their defense, because as I remember, it should be 4%, and when you should spend 4% from your GDP, and you spend 0.4, it's abnormal.
I think that NATO makes sense to the extent that we are not relying on the US military power. It makes sense only if we, and by we I mean European countries, if we decide to spend real money on our militaries, on our armies, tanks, aircrafts, and missiles, and we actually start treating our threats seriously. But for that to happen, our leaders, like Scholz and Macron and other leaders, need to understand that Russia is a threat. It's an existential threat, not to Georgia and Ukraine, to everyone, including themselves.
Yes. Do you think that if Scholz understands what is needed to do, he can do? I think German people should understand, not their leader exactly.
Well, after like 3 days after the invasion, he said that they would spend like 100, I think it was, billion euros on their military. It was something. Maybe they will follow it. We will see if they change their attitude. I'm afraid again that it might not really happen, because it really requires a change in the way you think about foreign policy. That you really are thinking in terms of the nature of a country that you're dealing with. Because if you're pretending that Russia is like Czech Republic, then you are not really going to change. You need to understand that it's not like Czech Republic. It's not like Denmark. It's not like Norway. It's a country that uses physical military force against its neighbors.
And for them, no problem there, no cold, no poorness, nothing for them. Anyway, they are aggression against neighbors every time, without, not without any reason, but they will always find some reason to attack. Okay, so anyway, sometimes I think that it's very hard to make some changes, if not changes mentality in the minds of people, that they push to their governments that should be done some changes
Hmm.
in NATO and Euro Union too. So sometimes I think it's very risky now because upcoming crisis, economic crisis, which come from pension funds or maybe some monetary system, it will have problem with for the countries of in the war. If during the war it begins financial crisis, what will happen at the time?
In Europe,
Yes,
I don't think it will have any impact on the attitude towards Russia. I don't think it will.
it will continue as it is. Do you think so?
Yeah, I think that yes. I think nothing will change in terms of how people view the attitude of our governments toward Russia.
Mhm.
So I don't think it will have any impact on that
Yes,
particular
I'm
issue.
afraid because inner problem will come in the first place maybe because of
Mm.
this crisis. Okay, I would like now to ask about your view from Poland to Georgia. How would it look like Georgia from Poland?
Well, I mean, I'm not really following Georgian politics. It is a country that is an eastern country that really wants to be close to the West and that shares Western values, and I think that's very important. And I know that Georgian people value freedom, and it's very important, especially in this part of the world, in this region. So from this perspective, I think that Georgia is very important, and I wish that the European Union was more open towards Georgia.
Is this mind understand in elites of politicians in Poland?
I don't think. No, I don't think so. And there was the so-called policy of normalization of relationships between Poland and Russia in Poland that started in 2008 and lasted until 2013. So it was after the invasion of Georgia. So I don't think there's any understanding of that. Maybe some emotional understanding in the sense that we know that Lech Kaczynski came to
Yes.
Georgia and he supported Georgia,
remember,
but in
yes.
terms of strategic thinking, I don't think so.
I remember that when he arrived here, it was some problems in Poland because of this arrival.
Mm.
Because some people used this visit against him at the time.
Yeah, because some Polish people, maybe a lot of them, are the so-called pragmatists. Why would you do that? We need to do deals with Russia, and so on, which what I think is a fundamental mistake to do.
Yes, maybe. Well, okay, for the last, maybe I forgot to ask something about these questions we spoke
Mhm.
now, so you can now, if you would like.
Yes, so what I would like to do is that I hope that our leaders, European leaders, will understand the necessity of moral judgment. So moral judgment isn't just saying that someone is horrible or someone is evil. It's understanding that something follows from that judgment, that we need to act in accordance with our judgment. And I hope that our leaders will understand that, because if they do not, we will be making those mistakes over and over again.
Yeah. So, as I understand and I agree, any of our acts should stand on morality.
Yes, because
Okay.
morality is necessary.
It's very important.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.